Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy C.J. Vogel, and the newest member of the On Texas Football family, my friend and good and co-worker Jeff Howe, joining us as well. You know how it works, guys. On the Friday live stream, a little bit shorter, or a little bit condensed version, if you will, a truncated edition of the live stream. But throw out your questions, comments. We'll address as many of them as we can. Super chats jump to the front of the line, and you can interrupt the show at any time. Also, we'll dive into a few topics on the show, but anything you guys want to talk about, of course, we'll do first and foremost. Also, coming up a little bit later on, we'll dive into some spring football discussion. I know it's over, but I want to get the guys' thoughts about a couple of questions I have wrapping up spring football, if you will. So we'll dive into that. What's up, guys? Thank you guys for joining us, no matter where you're from. I really appreciate all you guys joining us on a Friday. Always good to start off the weekend. Hope your weekend started off as well as mine and as well as we're going to start off here on the live stream today. All right. The first thing I want to ask you guys about is the spring and questions that you had going into the spring. Did you get answers? Because I was doing some thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know if I got as many answers to questions that I had going into the spring now that we're done with it. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing at all. I think maybe interior D line was a question I had, and we got some answers, that's for sure. Now with a total of 5 D tackles being brought in. But did you guys? I had questions about corner opposite Malik Muhammad. I don't know if I got answers. I don't know if I got real solid answers. I have possibilities.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got the answers I wanted. Do you guys have any of those? Because I was contemplating. I was like realizing there are some questions I had, and I don't know if I got the answers. I just have possibilities, but that's fine too because we're still really early on in this 25 season.
For me, the portal provided my answers. The portal activity provided my answers. I think now you could say they like their young talent at corner because they didn't go to the portal to get a corner. They still didn't like their numbers on the interior D line and felt like they needed to get, I consider Murad Watson an impact addition. So they didn't just add guys for numbers. They're looking, they want to make sure they're throwing as many quality bodies at the problem as they can. Those two are answered. I feel too like running back. I think the answer is I feel better about the depth at that position than I did initially, just because of Christian Clark's recovery and CJ Baxter's going to be back at some point. And, Weiser, James Simon had a really good spring. So, but as far as like the offensive line, tight end, like the other positions on offense, I still don't know that I have any answers. That's good, Rod. That's really making me think.
CJ?
Yeah, Rod, I like how you put that, right? It's not necessarily a solution, but it's possible answers to the solution. And I feel like I got that at both the cornerback spot opposite of Manny Muhammad, and I got it at running back. I don't know necessarily if it's going to be your surefire solution to all of the issues or all of the unknowns right now, but you have options. And if we've seen anything over the past few years, having multiple talented pieces will raise the level in which the competition in that room is held to. So I think that's encouraging. I don't know. I guess my still unknowns leaving the spring are who are you going to be your return men, right? Punt and kick.
There you go. That's a good one. Yeah, we didn't get no answers on that.
No answers. Yeah, we now know who's going to be the kicker, right? Mason Shipley coming in, Jack Boomeister being your punter. We know special team gunners for the most part. Warren Roberson's going to be a guy. You expect to see Ryan Niblett out there as well. Who of these young wide receivers do you see out in that group? I would assume Grayson Littleton is someone that they trust out there as well. But positionally, I don't know if there were many spots up for grabs coming into the spring, right? Wide receiver, you wanted to see who would take that leap. Well, you got to see that pretty immediately with no Wingo, no more. It was Parker Livingstone and it was Dalen McCutcheon of the youngsters, right? It was the two of them defensively on the secondary. You didn't have Derek Williams, but you saw Jelani McDonald kind of take a stranglehold of that other safety spot. So I wouldn't say that there are many unknowns other than what we don't normally talk about, which is a lot of special teams. So a lot of options for those question marks that still remain, at least.
Yeah, no, I like how you brought up the special teams because there were a lot of questions on special teams, still are. But yeah, they brought in your answers, right? You got your a kicker now, and maybe we talked about Gunner for a while. I think your tackles. I think that's something that's everybody pretty much knows. Hey, man, or at least believes Texas has their bookend tackles of the future with Brandon Baker and with Trevor Gooseby. So I think those are some couple of answers you got there. Do we? Are we sure on who the center is? Did we get our answer at the center?
Yeah, right now it's Cole Hudson. I think it's been established at this point that Daniel Cruz is the center of the future. But the offensive line, I don't feel like I got any answers. I mean, that first group that started spring ended spring as the first group, excuse me. I'm not going to get my answers to the O-line until the season starts, which is when push comes to shove. Even in scrimmage situations, like you can tell me they had a game where they won the red zone short yardage or they lost the red zone short yardage. I mean, line up against Ohio State and let's get in those situations, and then we'll figure out, if those questions have been answered. So are we kind of, I think it sounds like CJ and I are in agreement on corner and running back. And I'm in agreement with you, CJ, for the record on special teams, because we said, hey, who's going to win this kicking battle between Will Stone and Bert Auburn? And Sark's answer was neither one of you won. I'm going to So that's what that was. So, Rod, I don't know if you're in agreement. Would you agree that those three are probably answers that we got now? Special teams, at least minus the return guys, corner and running back.
Corner, I'm still, I'm not. This is not me being negative or pessimistic. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying I still don't have the answer. Like the guy, the dude.
Okay.
I don't have that. I mean, now, like I said, I'm optimistic. So I said, I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic that those possibilities that are out there, Gilbo, Kobe Black, Warren Roberson, Cade Phillips, I'm not that one of them will work out. But I didn't get my answer. I didn't get it in the spring. Like, it's going to be this guy. And like, I love the point that you brought up a couple of days ago. Hell, with the secondary, the initial answer that we get, it may change and evolve. And so what the secondary is going to be throughout the season, as you play Ohio State and you better have your ish together versus that wide receiving duo. And you can't afford to, have growing pains in the secondary. You can't afford to bring young guys along. It's Ohio State. You better, you got the best wide receiver in the country. Yeah, so you better be ready to go. So like you said, that may be a different solution, different answer for that particular problem. And then it is for when you start SEC play or once you get to the Texas A&M game, it might be a little different. Remember how Malik Muhammad came on late?
Yeah.
In that 23 season, it was like by the end of the season, it's like he's your starter. And I could see something like that, as you brought up. I could see something like that happening with the secondary. More and more I think about it, I think that was a very astute point that you made there. I think that we're looking at this group now and considering the first opponent they got of the season, I can't honestly. I think it's more likely that it looks a little different than it looked in game one late in the season.
Yeah. I don't know if this is 2001 Cedric Benson PTSD still with me in the back of my head, but it always felt like going back to your time playing, Rod, under Mac Brown, and this was Mac from the beginning of his time until it was over. It always seemed like if he needed to have an answer, the Oklahoma game was the time where he after that he had it figured out. Either I can stick with what I'm doing or I need to go a different direction.
Yeah.
So that for me is kind of set it up to make the Oklahoma game be the one where like, all right, coming out of that game, you either feel confident that what you're doing is working and you can stick with it, or nope, I gotta change course and do something else. So I think for the secondary, maybe the offensive line, I think definitely the circle of trust at wide receiver too, guys. I mean, Emmett Mosley hasn't taken a snap at Texas yet. DeAndre Moore was out the whole spring. Ryan Wingo got back late, but it's still going to take Arch some time to figure out, who he's most comfortable with, who he's got the best rapport with. That's something that could evolve. And I say the Oklahoma game, but you guys have heard me talk about it too. I just feel like the way the non-con sets up, then you get to bye, and then you go to Gainesville. I think by the time you go to Gainesville, based on who plays that day and who doesn't, and formationally what you look like on offense, your personnel packages on defense, I think the Florida game is going to set up pretty much the rest of the season in terms of, all right, this is kind of the foundation of who Texas is in 2025. And if you've got injuries or performance issues or whatever, you can go from there. But what they tried out against Florida is going to pretty much tell you what the foundation of that team is.
I think spring is kind of foreshadowing some of the things that we may see during the season. Like like I said, there are possibilities, and there seems to be, kind of this evolving idea of the secondary, right? Because you don't have, Derek Williams there yet, right? And at one point, Jonah Williams will be added into the mix of a secondary, and and what's Warren Roberson? Is this just a spring fling, or is this the real deal that we can trust in the season? So but like you said, with the offensive line, you're like, hey, man, it's been the same O-line pretty much the entire time, because there is more of an emphasis on that continuity. And I kind of see that during the season, that even if the O-line struggles early, which I could see it. I could see that happening. First, definitely going against Ohio State to start the season. And, one of the things, especially you were talking about this, Jeff, the zone blocking principles, when you run a lot of zone, which Texas does, that's about guys being hive-minded, everybody being on the same page, being able to communicate, being able to always communicate, everybody communicating, and being able to kind of understand the nuances of the scheme. And these guys just may not be there yet as a group. And that may take some time to gel. And you're not necessarily, I don't know if you're adding, like I said, the secondary, you're going to be adding some pieces, like come training camp, like you're going to add a starter. You're going to add a 5-star at one point in that room. You're not really adding that in the O-line room. You know what I mean? Like that group is the group. And so kind of what we're talking about, how we think the secondary is going to evolve and transform throughout the season. And with the O-line, you may have a rotation of guys you kind of trust, but for the most part, you do want to get that 5 that will work best together to give you the chance to succeed as an offense.
Yeah, and the one thing for me in both places, right, whether it's the secondary or the offensive line, it's, continuity, whether it be just second unit guys moving on into that first group, or, having a Michael Taft back there to control communication, to make sure that there is, the same page for everybody back there. For the offensive line, Rod, I'm with you. You're going to be tested right away, right? Just as you are for the secondary. You could argue, especially with what Ohio State did in the portal for its front seven, you could argue the biggest test of the entire season for both the secondary and the offensive line will come week 1 against Ohio State. So, I know it's not going to be perfect, right? No week 1 game ever is, unless it was 2016 Alabama against USC. Those are rare. But point being, you're going to find an opportunity and a lot of common ground to take what you know about your team, what works well, and then kind of smooth it out over the next 3 games before conference play starts. And that's really the most important part of the season is, once you get to game 5, you got to be firing on all cylinders, because we've seen how tough it is to win in the SEC conference. We've seen what it's like if you slip up against a Kentucky and your Ole Miss last year, and you're expected to compete in the SEC championship, but also make the college football playoff. You can't have a week where you play an off game, because you'll certainly see, what some of those repercussions are if you slip up and lose to a team you're not supposed to. So for Texas, and it's 3 really big road tests this year. Obviously, Ohio State's going to start it off, but you've got to split Florida. You've got to split Georgia. One of the 2, you got to come away with the win. We'll see what each team looks like then. But by then, I would imagine you got the offensive line figured out. You know what they're good at. And, Jeff, you've talked about it all offseason. Fit their strength. Don't try to force the puzzle piece if it's not its place, right? And by that, I mean using the strengths of the offensive line and the personnel that you deploy up front to then dictate what you do in the running game, rather than saying, hey, we're going to be an outside zone team no matter who is up front in front of us. That's going to be the key for me early on as well.
I think, too, with the O-line, I'll say this last point on the O-line real quick. If I'm Kyle Flood, and let's say this starting offensive line that you're in the spring with left to right is Gooseby, Neto, Hudson, Campbell, Baker. If that's your starting O-line coming out of camp, right, for the Ohio State game, I'm going to let them play through their struggles against Ohio State, because I don't necessarily want to disrupt chemistry that's already shaky anyway. Like, I don't want to say, hey, Kojo's going to get the 3rd series, or, I'm going to do a lot of rotating at guard, which Flood doesn't do that a whole lot anyway. Sark didn't do that a whole lot anyway.
Yeah.
What I would do if I'm Kyle Flood is the Ohio State game is going to give you a baseline. If somebody struggles, let's say those next two non-conference games, then you've got that last non-conference game to where you can say, all right, now I'm going to change it. I need to get this offensive line. This is my one chance to put this offensive line in the game situation before the bye week and before SEC play starts. So I think if you get through those two non-conference games, basically, if this offensive line, if this is still your one offensive line coming out of non-conference play, I think it's your one offensive line the rest of the year. I think the only thing that would change is if somebody really struggles, or if like a Nate Kibble or a Kojo or maybe even a Nick Brooks like forces the hand of the staff. You're like, no, we got to get him some snaps.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think if I feel like this, let's say the Ohio State game, secondary struggles a little bit, or offensive line struggles a little bit, it's much, in my opinion, much more likely they're going to bench somebody in the secondary than them benching somebody on the O-line. It's just the reality of it. Matter of fact, I don't know. I think, because we saw a couple of guys, I remember a couple of guys getting benched in the secondary this past season for play that was a little bit inconsistent. So like I said, that's just my thought, and I agree with Jeff on that one. Okay, let's thank we got some questions, and we'll get to those here in just a second. Let's thank our first sponsor, our friends at Von Lane, before we move on here on our Friday live stream. If you got to get to from one city to another, and we know traveling to the major Texas cities, in between the major Texas cities, can be really, really tough, whether you're flying or driving. And like always, it's a toss-up. Which one of those can be more efficient for you and more effective? And if you deal with the airport chaos, and dealing with the flight delays and the overpriced items in an airport, you understand that that travel experience, honestly, is just not worth it overall, especially just traveling within the state of Texas. Or do you brace yourself for those hours on the road, dealing with traffic, battling all the traffic on the road and the road rage, and also trying to make sure that you don't lose too much productivity by trying to drive between the major Texas cities, Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio? Now there's a third option, folks, and it's better in every way. Our friends over at Von Lane, vonlane.com, they have you set, folks, with a luxurious experience. You won't find anything like it on the road today. You arrive at a luxurious hotel terminal, all right? No TSA lines and no long-term parking lots, just a seamless boarding experience that takes minutes, not hours. You settle into a plush leather seat. You got a hot towel and a pillow and a blanket, if you prefer, at arm's reach. Your attendant offers complimentary snacks, beverages, and on select departures, you also have a full meal if you like that as well. If you need to relax, you can lean back and enjoy the ride. If you want to stay productive, they have high-speed Wi-Fi and power at every seat. Also, if you're unplugging or just powering through, the Von Lane team is monitoring traffic in real time using smarter routes and efficient detours to keep your trip smooth and on schedule. And now is the perfect time to plan your fall travel. Booking is open through September, so whether you're headed to a college football game, a weekend getaway, or a business trip that needs to be done right, Von Lane makes the journey part of the reward. Von Lane serves Austin, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and in the Southeast, Atlanta, Nashville, and Memphis. Visit vonlane.com and use the OTF code, OTF25. That's OTF25 to save $20 off your first ride with Von Lane. Von Lane, elevated regional bus transportation. We appreciate them for being sponsors of our Friday live stream and being a part of the On Texas family. All right, let's get to it here. A couple of questions. E. Kim says, is Texas recruiting hard? 2026 D-tackle Tiki Ola from Bastrop.
I wouldn't say hard. He's certainly someone that Texas has recruited in the past, someone that Texas still kind of keeps tabs on. But right now, SMU, Notre Dame, certainly two schools that are higher on the list for Tiki than Texas. And I think Texas, again, when you start to look at some of these official visits that they have set up in the 2026 class on the defensive line, right? You could go to that June 13th weekend alone and look at Bryce Perry Wright, Tico Crittenden, Dylan Berryman out of Louisiana, Vodney Cleveland out of Alabama, Kendall Gerville, June 20th, in Florida, James Johnson, who was on campus over the week in the spring, Damari Simeon, from the Northeast. There are a lot of prospects that made it to campus this spring, in which I didn't hear Tiki did. So I think right now each school's kind of, going their own routes at the moment. And again, it's felt like Texas making sure that they recruit their backyard first and foremost. Jeff, I know that we just recruited a video on this for Saturday, actually. Making sure that you go through your due diligence in your backyard. Don't let anybody, within the Austin area or the Central Texas area slip through your fingers. But ultimately deciding if there's a better prospect elsewhere, you have to go with your gut. And if you're Texas, competing with the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Alabamas and whoever else is in the competition to win a national championship, that talent must come where the best talent is from. And that's where Texas is going right now.
Yeah, Kenny Baker's not afraid to get in the fight. And I think Tiki Ola falls into the group where in the last cycle we saw Landon Rink and Dylan Battle and guys like that fall, which I think there were just some guys that Bo Davis had higher on the board than Kenny Baker does.
Yeah.
And probably vice versa. Kenny Baker's got some guys higher on the board than maybe Bo Davis would have.
Yeah.
I would put Notre Dame as the favorite in that recruitment right now.
Okay.
This is also a shameless plug to go check out Football Theory on the channel because Rod and I got into Austin area recruiting as well this week.
Best it's ever been. It's basically talent. NFL talent in the Austin metro area has never been this prolific. They've never had this. I think they had 6 of them in the Austin metro from the greater Austin metro area that were drafted this year. Like I said, I can't back in the old school. I was saying the modern era because I don't know. Yeah, I got to go check out the pre-modern era of drafts. Maybe that was a time where Austin was booming, but based on the theory that Jeff and I talked about, with population booms being able to somewhat predict where you're going to get these talent booms in these metro areas, Austin being one of them, the growth of greater Austin has really kind of led to the talent really surge, if you will, here in the Austin area too. Now you're on average, you're having almost 3 players drafted per year since 2020.
Yeah, I think one area you gotta kind of keep at arm's length. You got to keep it warm. Is that central plex really going from like Copper's Cove all the way down I-14 up to Belton and Temple? Because you can still get players in the area. I mean, Jaden Chapman's on the roster right now, and we've seen Texas going to Belton and Temple in the past. The problem with that area is you've got the volatility because of Fort Hood, and you've got constant turnover in the schools. So, I mean, there may be a year where because certain families move into the area where, hey, you got like 5-6 kids in a cycle that might be able to play for you. Yeah. And then you may go 2 or 3 cycles where there's nobody. So it's always, but yeah, to your point, Rod, Austin is becoming a priority. CJ was, and we'll have this video on the channel tomorrow. CJ was at Weiss this week, and that's one that they don't just have, 27s. They got some 28s that can play. So there's a couple spots we're seeing that are starting to produce some kids.
If I can go even further, look, taking care of your backyard's big. With Texas's national approach here, I think there are some in-state schools that are starting to capitalize on some guys that otherwise, and probably 5-10 years ago would have been locks to go to Texas. And Baylor certainly being aggressive in the NIL game more so than they ever have before. We know SMU, Houston are going to be some schools that retain some top talent from each respective areas, and we all know what Texas Tech can do. And I think that's going to be worth keeping a close eye in terms of what they do, not just out of the portal, because we know that that's going to be the case, but in high school recruiting, how do they kind of, etch out their own area of this 26 class? Are they able to poach, a top 5 player in the state? Are they able to poach a few from the top 20? Because we know that, they're going to be aggressive up there, and they have the means to do just that. We've seen it out of the portal. I don't know what their roster number looks like in terms of NIL money spent this year, but I have to imagine it's amongst the most of anybody this cycle in the country. But I'm starting to look a little bit closer in this 26 class. They just had Jamarian Carlton on campus. They just had Felix Ojo on campus. Does that start to move the needle for either one of them? We'll have to wait and see.
You can make the argument that Division I football, FBS football in the state of Texas has never been better from the standpoint of the opportunities that in-state kids have. because you got, A&M and Texas are in the SEC. You've had Houston move up into the Big 12 with TCU, Baylor, and Tech. SMU's up in a power conference now. And, we've seen schools like Texas State and North Texas and UTSA. We've seen schools like that get to bowl games and be competitive in their leagues. So, yeah, it's a fun time to be an alum or a fan of a lot of these FBS programs. And I even think, they're out there on the periphery. I think, Rod, you did the Game of Thrones breakdown for the FBS schools in Texas. I think then you decide that UTEP was like if you've been what was it, the wall they called in Game of Thrones?
I think they were the Wildlings.
Night's Watch, that's UTEP. Like, they're so far out there, like we forget about it.
Yeah.
But I think, hey, Scotty Walden got, they got Malachi Nelson out of the transfer portal, and maybe they can put something together too. Who knows?
Yeah. Good stuff. Great reference there. Forgot all about that, Jeff. All right, let's thank our friends over at South Point Dodge before we move on. Got some more questions to answer, but let's thank our friends at South Point Dodge, southpointdodge.com. Texas football fans, you can score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point with our friends at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including the all-new 2025 Jeep Wrangler. You can get the real deal today and drive away in the Jeep Wrangler, a vehicle built for adventure. Plus, you can get employee incentive pricing. What that means is it's a fancy way of saying you pay what the employees pay. Right now at South Point Dodge, you get the employee discount. That is the real deal. Nobody offering a deal better than my friends over at South Point Dodge. So you can score big today at South Point Dodge with that employee incentive pricing, but also you can go check out their inventory for yourself off of I-35 in South Austin, or you can go to southpointdodge.com. That's southpointdodge.com. And we appreciate them for all of their support of Owen Texas football. And no matter what you need, whether it's a car or a truck, or maybe you got a trade-in, or maybe you want something new or something used, South Point Dodge is Austin's automotive everything. So trust me, they can help you out no matter what your automotive needs may be. Thank you very much to southpointdodge.com. All right, how about this question from John? Is Texas done in the portal? If not, what positions would they go for?
It's a good question. Texas still has 2 scholarship spots remaining out of its 85 allotted scholarships for the season. I don't know of right now if there's anybody that they have their eye on. And, of course, the portal window is closed. But as we saw last year, should you get into fall camp and a guy goes down with injury or a position gets banged up pretty early, you're able to go then grab a grad transfer, somebody who's still looking to play some college ball. Texas did that last year with Velton Gardner. Obviously, that was unfortunate in the sense that he didn't pan out due to an eye injury. But right now, Texas is kind of just standing pat. Where would they go, Jeff? We've kind of talked about it. Maybe a veteran running back, maybe another cornerback. I feel like they've addressed everywhere that they've needed to. And, I don't necessarily look at a single position at the moment with a glaring weakness, but hey, if you're able to find somebody, in that Silas Bolden role, I'd go all the way in as in, find me a returner, because we talked about it. I don't know who that's going to be right now.
Oh, Jeff, you muted.
Uh-oh. Hit the thing.
Oh, there it is.
I beat you, Matthew.
Josie's going to get me on that. I think it's along the lines of, if you go back to last cycle, when we saw Texas go after Jabbar Muhammad in the portal, like, corner wasn't in need, but he was just so good and could be a difference maker that they felt the need to go after him. Kind of like David Bailey this year. Texas didn't need an edge, but man, if you can get another elite pass rusher, you'll get it. So I think you keep a spot open for kind of best available player, even if you don't need the spot. But I could see, possibly I could maybe see, maybe another number at tight end, maybe would make sense. And not that they do it, but it would make sense to me, thinking it out. Maybe another receiver would make sense. But maybe Chris Jackson just likes the young guys yet. I think, though, if they need it, the only thing they really need at this point to kind of bring this full circle, what we started talking about at the top, if you can find somebody that's got legit return experience, then I think you should probably go after that person. Other than that, I don't think there's anything they need, guys.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. Thank you for the question, John. We appreciate it. How about this one from Brendan? Brendan says the O-line will be a better short yardage run blocking unit this past year. Thoughts?
Comes down to those three guys on the interior.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
If Cole Hudson, Neto, and DJ Campbell, if it clicks for those guys, yes, even though Jake Majors played a ton of football, and I love Hayden Connor's story, but if Cole Hudson and Neto can work together with DJ Campbell and it clicks for those three guys, you'll be a better offensive line in short yardage, goal line, red zone situations.
Yeah, Texas for the offensive line this spring, I mean, it had its moments. I think I would have liked to have heard of a little bit more consistency in terms of the offensive line pushing around some of those inexperienced or just now arriving to Austin defensive linemen, as we've talked about. But really, we've talked about it as well. The strength of this Texas team is going to be its front seven with, a Colin Simmons on one end and Anthony Hill in the middle. We've talked about it in the sense that we know Brad Spence is going to be really good with Leon Galafau and Ty Anthony Smith. So Texas is really good up front. It's just kind of frustrating to also hear, hey, this was supposed to be the time where you heard the offensive line taking that leap with all these guys being senior on the interior. So we'll see. But that's what good competition does. Hopefully by the time that the season rolls around, they're ready to roll.
No, this goes to a larger conversation, though, about the offensive line last year, really the one they've had previously, because they had so much continuity. Those guys were together for, multiple years. They were a finesse offensive line. They were really good. I mean, go look at how many guys were drafted. That's a really good offensive line. But they were a finesse offensive line. So they at times they would underachieve and were lackluster in short yardage power situations where they had to move another human being against their will when everybody in the stadium knew, all right, you just got to go get them 2 yards. And everybody knows you got to get it. Oftentimes, how often? And I need to go do the research on it. Did we see Sark use creativity over physicality in those situations? In reverse, in and around, a snap through the legs, the Arch Manning package. Like he was like, hell no, I'm not going to run straight ahead of nobody, even though they know that's coming, because we don't do that very well. I think that was the biggest indictment, is Sark saying, yeah, we don't really do that really well. We're not going to just run straight ahead. We don't do that. And we saw them fail in those situations often in the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see if that is a strength, if Sark decides, I'm going to play bully ball in some of those situations, or rather say, nah, let's lean on creativity and innovation in those situations rather than playing bully ball, because that's just not what we do well.
Yeah.
To do that, you have to trust that your offensive line is going to consistently reestablish the line of scrimmage, because in short yardage offense, a stalemate is a win for the defense.
Yeah.
If you're not moving forward, you're losing. So I think that it's to be determined. But Brennan, to answer the question, I like their chances to be that group, a group that's much better in short yardage.
Yeah, I think we all would, right? And again, it remains to be seen. They have necessarily the bodies, the skill sets for it in that interior. Look at DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson, and Nato. It makes sense to think that it's going to be better. We got to see it before officially knowing. The one thing I also wonder is, duo has been a big part of this Texas running game.
Yeah.
Inside duo, you basically double the defensive lineman, and then one of the offensive linemen jumps up to that second level and catches a linebacker to create a lane, create a push. Does that remain a big piece? Will that improve? I assume it will be a big piece. And if it is, this is the group that's better suited to move those bodies off the line of scrimmage than what we saw a year ago. So, again, we know that the Texas front seven is going to be really good. They're really talented already, but we won't really know until we see it in Ohio State week 1.
All right. Good stuff. Let's thank another one of our sponsors. Let's thank our friends over at Advanced Pain Care. They got a message for you out there. If you're dealing with pain of any sort, from old injuries or just father time, listen to this message from our good friends at Advanced Pain Care.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
Thank you to our friends at Advanced Pain Care. I actually got one close to the house, actually, about 5 minutes away. I didn't even know that. So we started actually doing lives for Advanced Pain Care. Started looking them up. So I might be looking them up too.
I'll never get used to gray VY, by the way.
Oh man. Hey, trust me, it's it hurts all of us, because if VY's old, then what does that mean for me? I remember when VY came in, I was on campus as one of the OGs back then. So I don't want to think about it. It's depressing. All right, getting back to the questions here. How about this one from Jack says, seriously, whatever happened to the I formation? The spread pretty much killed the I formation. It didn't kill it, but it made it pretty much an endangered species. And the proliferation of the spread, because now you can't even recruit guys to run those kind of offenses, because very few high schools are developing those kinds of players, because they're all running spread systems. So number one, you can't recruit those kind of athletes. That's really rare. And then, it's, man, you gotta, like, it, to me, it's a working smarter, not harder thing. And that would be kind of working harder these days and not smarter to run the I formation.
Show me entertainment, show me efficiency. That's where spread football comes in. Leave the I formation for those schools up in the Big Ten. I don't need to see it.
I mean, if you can get you a Ricky Brown or a Will Matthews, then hell yeah, you can go. Those guys are not around.
Mod Hall, right? Mod Hall.
Mod Hall. But Texas had a good run of fullbacks.
Hell yeah.
But those, you just don't. You got to tell we talk all the time, like the NFL has to work with what the college game is giving them, right? Colleges have to work with what high school's giving them. And, the days of, friend of the channel, Matt Trissel or Chad Stevens, Rod, a couple of your former teammates, those days are gone.
Those days are gone, man. Yeah. No, I just like I was recruiting with fullbacks. Sorry, that's no fullback on the roster, right?
You're picking somebody off the D line to be a fullback.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing the jumbo packages have fullbacks and extra linemen. Great point. There you go. All right, how about this one from Jay Lee? He's got a super chat. He says, how does Wingo and Michael Terry compare size-wise
good question.
In real life? Oh, that is a good question.
Yeah, look, they're both listed at 214 pounds on the roster. I would say it's a little bit of a different 214 for each. I think Michael Terry's still a little bit more wiry than Ryan Wingo. He still has plenty of room to build on his frame, and that's why we think that tight end could be, or an H-back position could be in the works for his future. I think Michael Terry right now, is with his length and size, it doesn't look like he's carrying 214. I think that's where the impressiveness comes for him. Of course, he's about 6'3" and a quarter, probably. I would say Ryan Wingo's about 6'2" and some change. So a little bit taller on the Michael Terry side, but a different weight proportion in terms of where you see the weight. I think Michael Terry's a little bit bigger up top, and Michael Terry a little bit thicker on the bottom half, if you will. And that's where the wiriness comes in for Terry. So a lot of room to grow for Michael Terry, where I think you don't want to see Ryan Wingo touching 220. I think 215 is probably exactly where you want to see him kind of evened out.
I don't want my receivers looking like David Boston. They look like Andre Johnson. I don't want to look like David Boston.
They don't get that reference, Jeff. That's too old, man. It's old school.
Patriots.
CJ he can throw it in the Google machine. When you got Rod, there was even rumors back in his high school days at Humble that David Boston was into substances.
Yes. Yeah. Those rumors are out there. I remember those. And
I'll add this. I ran into Calvin Johnson this weekend. Megatron.
What?
And let me tell you. Yeah. Damn. 6'5". What is he, about 230 is what he played at? You wouldn't have any idea he was more than 200 pounds, just the way that his weight's proportioned out.
Yeah, he's so long.
Yeah,
right?
So long and lengthy. I think I don't want to compare that to Michael Terry, but with Michael Terry, you wouldn't expect him to be 215 if he walked up and shook your hand, right? So it's crazy how the weight changes with those lengthier wide receivers. And, of course, Megatron being one of the greatest to ever do it. I could imagine Rod having to line up opposite of that. 6'5", 230 running 4.38 or whatever it was. Good luck.
You should have told him a lot. Could you line up and take a picture with you playing bump and run coverage on him and see how it looks from the side?
Look, I'm fine, Rod. I'm short. I don't need to look even shorter than Calvin Johnson.
I'm not that much taller than you, though, CJ. I mean, we're pretty close. You know that. So I'm just saying, because I could at least know how I would look against Megatron. But oh man, that's crazy. That's pretty wild. That's pretty cool.
That was cool.
Yeah. All right. Getting back to the questions here. How about this one from James Henson and CB? Kind of similar here. James Henson says, "Hey Rod, Quinn QJ. I'm assuming he says Quinn Jammer here. Gave you praise on coffee and football this morning. Hook 'em." And CB said, "Where did you have Jammer ranked in your DBU rankings?" Okay. First of all, I love me some Quinn Jammer. I was roommates on the road with my man Jam. So me and I started across from him at Texas too. And not only was he an amazing corner, I mean, this dude's first of all, you got to see his arms. Like he's got arms that are, I mean, they had to be some of the longest arms I've ever seen on a cornerback. I mean, just built for bump and run coverage. And he had, you remember Hulk Hogan used to always talk about his 36-inch pythons? Dude, he had, I swear they had to be 28 inches or something, dude. He had these huge arms. Like it was always, people were always like, damn, look at his arms. They were long and they were cut. Like he was just swole. And that's why he initially played safety. And he was an awesome safety. He probably would have been first round safety if he had played safety. But at that time, the game was evolving where everybody would want these bigger wide receivers. You remember this time, speaking of Megatron, everybody wanted big wide receivers out there playing the X, and he was perfect for that evolution of the game, and that's why he was drafted so high. But great, I mean, all-time great DB. CB, I had him, I believe on my last DBU rankings, he was 7th. I believe on my last, and I know some people are like that's disrespectful. Like I said, my DBU rankings, I'm gonna come out with the latest ones because it's obviously deserving with Jadae Barry being another Thorpe Award winner. But I mean, trust me, guys, it's tough. The DBU rank, it's hard to just kind of crack the top 5, top 10. So to be in the top 10, because you got multiple Thorpe Award winners now. You got Mahuff, you got Aaron Ross, you got Jadae Barron, Jerry Gray, and Johnny Johnson ain't ever. I mean, that was pre-Thorpe. So everybody's assumption is they would have won the Thorpe. Yeah. So that's the top 5 right there. So I ain't trying to be disrespectful, Jam. I think Jam is awesome. Hard to crack the top 5. Then you got Earl Thomas, who probably should have won the Thorpe. Got robbed of the Thorpe.
Eric Berry has his Thorpe Award. I will die on that hill.
Yeah, Earl Thomas so he got robbed of the Thorpe. And then I ain't even talking about a lot of the old school guys in that era too. Nathan Vasher's really high on my list because he's tied for the lead all time in interceptions. I played with him, and that's why I got it. I was an eyewitness to know how great he was. Both him and Jen. Those guys are legendary lifetime Longhorn. So yeah, I feel bad. I don't know where Jam is going to be in my latest. He going to be in the top 10. It's hard to knock him out of the top 10 in my opinion. On
my DBU Mount Rushmore, I mean, I've got 2 Thorpe Award winners that aren't on there.
Ooh. Damn, Jeff. What the hell, man?
I got Jerry Gray and Johnny Johnson have to be on there.
They have to be on there. I'm with you.
And then I would go Michael Huff. And to me, Earl Thomas would be because Earl doesn't have the career numbers because he wasn't in Texas that long.
He wasn't in Texas long enough. I agree.
Those 2 years he played, they were just as good at 2 years as anybody's ever had at Texas.
Yeah. That's why he gets bumped down on my list too, because it's my DBU list rankings is about what you achieved at the University of Texas. Mm-hmm. And that's why Jadae Barron, it's hard to deny him. He was there so long. So he achieved a lot actually because he was there so long. And then on top of that, he's like he's a native, like he's Central Texas, Austin, Texas, baby, having their best year ever in the NFL draft. He was a big part of that. So he's high on my rankings. But like I said, it's pretty obvious. I can tell you my top 5. It ain't gonna change. I'll do the research again. It's hard right now to change Johnny Johnson, Jerry Gray, Huff Daddy, Aaron Ross, and now Jadae Barron. I mean, that's gonna be the top 5.
And let's not forget too, Jerry Gray, on top of the phenomenal player that he was a first-round draft pick. Jerry Gray once ran down Bo Jackson from behind and caught him.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
So, like that in and of itself that's Hall of Fame.
Jerry Curl. With the Jerry Curl, you know what I mean? Sweating. You imagine how hard it is to play DB with a Jerry Curl, sweating, That means that the Jerry Kill juice could get in your eyes and blind you trying to play DB back then. No, man. Jerry Gray was just that cool. Had to have the Jerry curl and also, out there playing it at all American level. It's amazing. So, all right, we'll get into it. Thank you guys for that question. And thank you to my man, Quentin Jam. I love Jam. And since then, he's kind of done some things to kind of turn around his life in a lot of ways. And he preaches God to some of the young guys about decision making. So I love what Jam's doing. He's actually trying his best to be an example for all the young guys out there. So, all right, let's get back to the questions here. How about this one from Salty Q? Is Vosick gonna be another Troy O'Meary? What could have been? Damn. Yeah.
Oh. Fingers crossed that he's not, right? Of course, injury luck hasn't been friendly to Colton Vosick. He was in a sling for most of the spring. Towards the back end of the spring, he was actually out of the sling. So, shoulder injury in January kind of derailed what could have been a really big opportunity for him to get on the field and win some of those reps with Colin Simmons being a little limited. Texas knows what they got with him. You didn't have, obviously, Smith the Rogbo. Trey Moore was bumped back to linebacker. This could have been a big year or big spring for Vosick. And I'm not ready to write him off in any part, right? Because when we did see him on the field a year ago, he made plays, right? He had 2 sacks last year and what about 30, 40 pass rush opportunities. When you compare the sacks and, that ratio of snaps to pass rush attempts, it's a pretty good ratio in terms of getting home to the quarterback. So a lot of athleticism, a lot of bend. You just got to stay healthy and get him on the field. And that's been the biggest deterrent in terms of what we could have seen from him so far in his career. He stays on the field. He'll be a guy that contributes for the Longhorns this fall.
David Rawls mentioned it. Rod, another one of your former teammates, Brian Pickrell might be a better example of Colton Vosick, because Brian Pickrell was productive when he was on the field. His body just let him down, his shoulders and so that's probably, but hey, I'm with CJ. I'm not writing off Colton Vosick yet by any stretch.
Yeah, no, when I see him, I love him. I just don't see him enough. One of those guys. All right, getting back to the questions here. Row left. Haven't heard much about Ty Anthony in the spring. Any updates on him and how he's progressing?
Yeah, he's doing fine. Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, I was going to say just that. I mean, he's doing fine, right? He's coming along as a year 2 linebacker. He's continued to add weight right in that 223, 225 range. Again, the number one thing that strikes me about Ty Anthony Smith, and we've heard it from David Benda a year ago, we heard it from Anthony Hill himself, further along in his Texas career in terms of football intelligence, in terms of identification, than Anthony Hill was whenever he got to Texas 3 years ago. So take of that as you will. Of course, Texas really, really deep in that linebacking room. When you add a Brad Spence, when you add a Trey Moore, of course, Leon Galafal's not going anywhere. But I think Texas is going to have a really solid piece with Ty Anthony Smith in his career. And again, I talk about it all the time, having watched him in 7-on-7 back in high school. Very rangy player who has an idea of what's behind him in coverage, right? This is a guy that gets where he needs to be, route concepts, and what might be coming in terms of 7-on-7, where to go, where the sticks are. That's something that's going to pay off. And we saw that already with his interception against Florida this year. I'm a big fan of Ty Anthony Smith. And I think this spring was another step in the right direction for when it's his turn to man the middle of the field.
Yeah, I think you look at him coming out of Jasper, kind of reminds me of another guy that came out of Jasper, Sean Witherspoon, when he played in Missouri. Similar. Sean Witherspoon, Witherspoon's a little bit bigger, 6'2", and played in the 240s. I don't know if Ty Anthony is going to get that big, but it's going to determine. It's going to be up to whenever the physical, his body catches up with his football instincts and his football IQ and his readiness and his understanding of the defense. Whenever the physical part catches up, I think he'll be fine. But CJ just laid out the depth chart. It's really hard for him to find snaps right now. I'm thinking more about, a 2026 linebacker room where Anthony Hill goes, but you've got Leonga Lafau coming back, Brad Spence coming back, and bigger roles for Ty Anthony Smith and Bo Barnes.
Yeah. That's a healthy room right now.
Yeah, very.
That's what I say. I think the defensive coaches probably have a little bit more trust in the linebacker room than overall in all with all the maybe than the DBs put as a unit together, just because they have so many guys that I think that can be consistent and play at a high level there. You got Leon LaFleur, you know Anthony Hill's an All-American, brought in a guy like Brad Spence, got Ty Anthony Smith in there, and I've actually heard some good things about the young guys too. So good stuff there. Let's get back to it. How about this?
Rod, I think it's worth mentioning too, just to get back to we don't need to bypass or gloss over the fact that one of Sark's biggest strengths is his ability to hire coaches. You lose a really good inside linebackers coach, Jeff Choate, and in a lot of ways, based on the feedback that guys have had, you might have upgraded with Johnny Nansen, because I think Anthony Hill will tell you he benefited from having Johnny Nansen, and I think that goes for that room. So, man, credit to Sark for you losing really good coaches, but hiring really good coaches to fill those roles.
No, you make that argument at the wide receiver coach. Now, I love me some Brendan Marion, but just in terms of Chris Jackson's a position coach, some people would argue that Chris Jackson may have done a better job. But I think Brendan Marion's a great football mind, in my opinion. Now a head coach, actually. You can make that argument, like you said, with Nansen or with Choate, Dwayne Aquino. If you the coaches did a great job. Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon did an amazing job, but Coach Aquino is known as kind of one of the made men of coaching secondary. So that's a great point. I agree with you. Sark he's been knocking it out of the park with those coaching hires. Speaking of coaching hires, let's stick with Sark here and some of the lessons he's learned. Brian has an interesting question. He says, guys, what do y'all think Sark has learned and applied to his coaching after coming up short at the 10-yard line the last 2 seasons? Thank you for the question, Brian. The number one thing I think he has learned, I think about 2 things. I think number one, and he said this actually, I think he's learned he has to have more. He said it. Those are his words. He's got to have more. I think he was talking about, and he even referenced this, schematically, strategically, you got to have more. Not that, and I said I thought Sark kind of ran out of plays last year. Felt like just somebody who studies and watches. I was like, kind of ran out of plays. In Ohio State game, guys, I was documenting, looking for, tendency breakers, looking for, things that were strategically something that Sark brought out that he could have looked at as an advantage, a schematic strategic advantage. I didn't see that much of it, if any. And he said after the season earlier this year that, hey, he needs to have more because the season is so long. And there's so much time in between, especially in terms of the postseason, that he needs to have more available. I think he's talking about players too, and I think he's talking about scheme. And now, whether that relates to him on the 10-yard line, that's kind of a red zone issue, which has been a systemic issue for Texas. So I think maybe Arch and the quarterback run game may be something that helps him and that he is willing to now embrace, which he was not willing to embrace earlier because he probably didn't have the option with Quinn. But I think he's now willing to embrace that because that may be one of the only ways he can solve those red zone issues that have, basically led to Texas coming up short the last couple of years.
Yeah. I'm hoping that bully ball, that quarterback run will alleviate the issues that we've seen in the red zone. And again, last year, the first 7-8 weeks, the red zone was great. Texas was, I think at one point, like 21 of 22 and converting red zone trips into points. Then you see, to your point, you kind of just ran out of juice, ran out of options. And for me, your best option would be to just, hey, you're at the 10-yard line. Let's run it 3 times, and hopefully you're in the end zone. Couldn't do that last year. Couldn't do that the year before. Is that going to be the case this year? We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, we talked about that at the beginning of the show. But what I do know is you've got a quarterback who, with 2 snaps inside the red zone this year, was able to score from 16 and, 24? So give me that a little bit more of. And Texas saw how difficult that is to defend against Arizona State when Sam Levitt in overtime just say, hey, I'm just going to scamper. Y'all aren't going to do anything on this 3rd and long. I'm just going to scamper, go score a touchdown, right? If you got a quarterback that can do that, hey, that solves a lot of things. But up front, it's got to start with the offensive line, then move on from what we have seen, Rod, is Texas going to those short corner comebacks, some of those whip routes. We saw a little bit of that smash concept. That was the go-to play in the 2-point conversion against Arizona State late in that overtime game as well. Does Texas have more of that? I'd like to see it because I think you're going to have the weapons to get open and create separation in tight situations like that. But I want to see more of that running game.
I think the other thing is develop your depth and trust it. You know, I go back to the Ohio State game. And not to say that Texas would have won the game, but how different is that game if you've got a 100% Trevor Gooseby at right tackle instead of Cam Williams on one leg?
Yep. It's fair.
Yeah. So I think develop your depth. Take advantage of the opportunities in non-conference play and when you can in select conference games to get your young guys in, guys that you feel like, hey, we may need this guy down the road. So that way you don't get into situations where Trevor Gooseby hadn't hardly played at all until the Texas A&M game when he was forced to play. I know that's not something you can necessarily control all the time, but I think Sark understands the importance of making sure you, number one, develop your depth, and two, that you trust it.
Yeah. I also wonder, and I know we're not, maybe Brian's not talking literally like, hey, 10-yard line, what do you do about that? The red zone issues. But I do wonder with the receivers now having different dimensions, like they're just physically different. They're a little bit bigger. Yeah. CJ, you guys talked about the back shoulder fade, potentially coming back, that, some of those concepts, maybe the comeback, just different route concepts. But even in the red zone, I just wonder if they'll be more effective. Not they're going to be throwing fades in the red zone, but they'll just be more effective with some of the passing concepts, just because the receivers could be more physical at the catch point, bigger guys. We shall see. Matthew Golden was great in the red zone last season.
But I think that's, I think that's something too, and maybe with the different skill sets, it'll change. I think that's something that Chris Jackson and Sark need to teach too, because for my liking, this wide receiver core, as great as it's been, they don't draw enough defensive pass interference penalties for as much as the ball gets put in the air. So that's I know that's a nitpicky thing for me to look at, but I'd like to see, especially if you're going to be throwing the deep ball more, then you got to teach your receivers, hey, you need to fight for it. And if you even think you got grabbed on an incomplete pass, you got to turn around and appeal to the official.
Yeah.
The one thing I wonder if Texas adds to its repertoire, and I forget his name on Twitter. I think it's Coach Casey Brown, maybe. Posts a lot of just great clips, great highlights, great, schemes and individual plays. There was a Stanford play from a year ago that was basically just a box out fade ball. You lined up your biggest tight end, your biggest wide receiver out wide. You get the height mismatch, and they, run from the 3-yard line, 4-yard line up to the cornerback, look like they're blocking. And instead of running towards the corner and putting the ball over the shoulder, but not even putting a move, you stay within the cornerback and the ball, right? So you're in between the two. You turn around, you get big like you're boxing out on a rebound, and the ball just goes up and you're right there. So with a Parker Livingstone, look, we talked about the jump balls. I don't know if that's going to be an efficient play call for Texas this year, but look, I could imagine splitting out a Jack Indries or a Spencer Shannon at 6'6", 6'7", and saying, hey, just go get big. We'll throw you a rebound. Jordan Washington, I think, would be great at it, right? Basketball background. So I always like seeing where Sark gets his ideas from, and I wonder if that's one that will pop up at some point this fall.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna predict at one point, because Sark loves, every now and then likes to trick plays, likes to get all funky and exotic with a trick play. And one of the things that Tom Herman's favorite trick plays was that offensive lineman, right? Some trick play to get an offensive lineman into a pass set. And that is now a very in vogue thing, because Ben Johnson at the Detroit Lions, he loves to throw passes to offensive linemen, get him going to pass the game. And I remember Tony Hill saying, you're more athletic now at tackle than you even were with Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams. I know they're big humans, but I just watched Trevor Gooseby just 360 dunk. I wouldn't doubt if there's a Gooseby trick play at one point that he's that agile.
A little Sam Cosby throwback.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about. Just thought, I don't know why randomly it sparked in the head. I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, because you just kind of describing that Stanford play. And is it Coach Dan Casey? Is it Dan Casey?
Dan Casey. Thank you.
He does good. He puts out a lot of good clips. I always look at his stuff for steal that play. Like, hey, steal that play. Sark, steal that damn play. That's a good play.
I thought you were going to say, Rod, how many times am I going to lose my mind and throw my hat CJ style if I see the freaking red zone fade more than like a couple of times.
Oh yeah, no, Jeff would lose it. Even if it's successful, Jeff's not about
The fade and the toss, the goal line toss, just fire both of those into the sun.
Well, we remember how the toss worked out for Texas against Ohio State. Not very well. All right, let's I know we got 2 more questions and then we'll end our live stream here. Oni wants to know, will Texas be in on Cooper Witten from Liberty?
Yeah, good question. I know that's going to be a highly coveted recruitment as well. Talented linebackers, 6'1.5", 6'2" right now. Right now, there is interest. Will Texas go that route? We'll have to wait and see. I know it's early. I don't believe an offer has been extended just yet, but certainly one with that NFL pedigree. We've seen Texas pursue guys just like that. It would make sense up in that DFW area, I believe Fort Worth, actually. So it's kind of a wait and see right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, they do like those guys. I call them old souls. They grew up in a football household. Texas Boy Wonder, how many freshmen do y'all anticipate to burn their red shirt? That is good.
I think it's easy. Well, I think it's probably easier to figure out which ones won't.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, Sark is I think you're going to see a lot of guys playing those non-conference games. I think, maybe guys that quite aren't physically there yet, like a Ricky Stewart, maybe who might need another year.
Yeah.
A Jonathan Cunningham who might need another year. I mean, I think most of your DBs are going to play on teams. They'll be on your coverage and return units.
Yep.
Those, Bo Barnes will be a guy, I'm sure, that gets his feet wet doing that. It'd be good opportunity for Nick Townsend to getting some work on teams. Michael Terry, same thing. So yeah, I think it's going to be easier to figure out which ones won't. I mean, you'll see them play. Will Josiah Sharma and Myron Charles, will they get the 4 games, over 4 games? I don't know. Plus, you got to figure out too, like this happened with Brandon Baker last year. You could play, once you get through the regular season. If you play beyond that, it doesn't count against your 4 games. So you can get you 4 games during the season, and then we could still see some of those guys play in an SEC championship game or playoff games or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think it's going to be easier to figure out which freshmen won't redshirt.
Yeah. Texas had 11 guys burn their redshirt last year. 11 guys held on to it. I don't think you're going to get anywhere close to those numbers this year. I think in terms of guys holding on to it, of course, I kind of look at your offensive linemen for the most part will redshirt, maybe accepted Nick Brooks, Ricky Stewart is one, Jonathan Cunningham another. Other than that, look, I think you're seeing a lot of contributions on special teams. And to your point, getting these guys acclimated to the length of this season, they're going to be used at some point because you would have loved to have had some more snaps for announced January late in the season to give a guy like a Vernon Brotner off Collins a breather there. So I think you're going to see a lot of these guys early on and then in SEC play, get them some valuable snaps. Also, I think Texas is just going to be able to blow some teams out much more than they were able to last year, in which some of those games, Vanderbilt's a good one that comes to mind. That game turned into a 3-point game towards the back end. You're telling me if that wasn't a 25-point game like it should have been in the middle of the third quarter, that some of these younger kids get some more run, we'll see.
Yeah.
CJ, I think Smith the Robo is another guy coming off the knee injury. Maybe you might stash him away for a year. But I think too, because you're not as experienced as you were last year. I mean, there's still gonna be guys, especially like those wide receivers, James Simon at running back, Cade Phillips and Grayson Littleton in the secondary. You're still gonna have guys that theoretically that are competing for spots in non-conference play. So yeah, I think a lot of those guys will play.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good stuff, guys. Thank you guys for all the questions and your participation. Let's thank our final sponsor of the evening before we say goodbye on the live stream today. Did you know the most awarded wine in Texas, folks, is actually the vineyard that is closest to Austin? That's right, Flat Creek Estate Winery. It's just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award this year. for their vintage wine, Super Texan. I'm a big fan of it. Actually, we had a member of the Owen Texas football family tell me at Fan Fest that they love the Super Texan, and they thanked me for my recommendation. Don't thank me. Thank the good folks over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. Super Texan is now available at your local Specs, but also they had a display at our local Central Market. So seems like the good word is spreading about Flat Creek Estate Wines, but also Flat Creek not only producing some of the best premium wines on the market, it's also a gorgeous venue with barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend. It's perfect for a day date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with your significant other. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. We really appreciate them for sponsoring our Friday live stream and being a part of the On Texas football family. I want to thank you for being a part of the On Texas football family as well. Thanks for joining us on a Friday. We know there are a lot of things you could be doing, so taking some time to join us is something that we really appreciate, helping us build this community. 80,000+ now because of you guys, and growing fast and growing strong every day. So we appreciate you guys here helping us out, and also making sure that you are a part of the On Texas football family. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. Thank you to CJ as well for all the expertise. Thank you, Jeff, for all of your knowledge. We appreciate it. Yes, hit the like button. I'm supposed to say that. Hit the like button. Like and subscribe. I should say that every time. That's how you know I'm not an influencer. All right. Well, if anything breaks, guys, you can be tuned in to On Texas Football here, the YouTube channel, or go check out OnTexasFootball.com. Yes, and be an OTFOG for only $49.95 right now. Use that code OTFOG, and you will get a 1-year subscription for just $49.95 to OnTexasFootball.com. All right, for CJ and for Jeff and for Matthew, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em.
Welcome.